I got, all these siblings, all this perspective, right? Plus my parents were born in the 1930s, right? So I had the privilege of hearing their stories coming up in the South. My mom was born in Georgia. My dad was born in Arkansas. They left the South for opportunities and came to Chicago, right? So I had the privilege of hearing their stories, hearing where they came from, how they grew up. My dad said he had to leave home at 17 because he lived in a community where our family were sharecroppers. He said he could only go to school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, he was working in the fields. So he was like, that felt like slavery to him. He said, when I went back to school on Monday, I missed the lessons because I'm like, what y'all learn Thursday, Friday? Because I missed school because I had to work in the field. So he said he had to leave. So slavery existed for approximately 400 years in this country. Just because it ended on paper didn't mean that the societal impact of slavery and the way that they did things ended upon the ending of slavery in 1863, because it did not. It continued, right? So then you go to policies that transition at the end of slavery. So, okay, we can't use slave codes anymore. We'll have these black codes or Jim Crow laws, right? That come into effect that would prevent this group of people in particular. These laws, these are laws on the books for this group of people to marginalize them, to hinder their success. Now, can some people succeed in spite of? Yeah, they can. But that's like a fish swimming upstream. The stream's going this way. The fish is going this way. Can they get up there? Yeah, but against all odds, right? It can happen. Should you use it as an excuse? No, but is it a fact? Yes, it is a fact that black people are held down, that redlining, you learn that in real estate, right? They don't teach that in school, right?
You learned that even before real estate,
You learn, right? So they heavily talk about it in real estate because you have areas in which they don't want to lend money because it's a black area. Or if they lend money, it's at higher interest rates. So your white counterpart can borrow money and pay a lower interest rate because he's in a white area. He or she is in a white area. But if you're in a black area, your interest rate is high because they're like, we don't really want to lend money in that area, right?
Well, even to your point, how they even developed the suburbs. I mean, the whole way that the suburbs were developed. I mean, that's a whole nother thing. But
that's a whole nother thing, right? So and there's white flight as well, right? So there are things that are true. Like there is a lot of truth to what happens. Can we all use it as an excuse? No. Should slavery be, taught? Yes. You should understand because you're like, how do we get here? Right? So how do we get to this point? Well, it's because of these previous things that have occurred that have led us to where we are today, which is, the wealth gap between white America, black America is a chasm, right? And there's a lot of reasons why. There's no silver bullet. There's no one reason why. It's a lot of reasons as to why there is this gap. Some of it is real estate. Some of it is wealth being passed down, which we did not have wealth that was passed down. We got some debt. When grandma and them died, they left with some debt or maybe a little money in a jar or a can, while white folks die with sometimes wealth, like, old money, right? So I learned, and not to continue to beat it up, but I did learn that, like find your most beautiful buildings in whatever city you're in, right? The most beautiful buildings, even if they're by water or if they're not by water, they're in the downtown area. A lot of those buildings are built upon land that's leased. So somebody purchased that land many, many years ago, and they leased the land for someone to build that property on. Therefore, the lease is like for 99 years because you can't move the building. So who's that money going to? A lot of that money is going to people that don't look like us. So when we're out working, you got people that's chilling because they trust fund babies, because they got money coming from old money that they have. Not all of them, granted, No, you got poor white people, absolutely. But you
Of
got some
course.
white folks that got a lot of money, and it's not. Is it fair? Absolutely not. Can we use it as an excuse? Absolutely not. Is there truth to how hard our struggle is? Absolutely. It is a
Absolutely.
true fact. Should
But
we
you know
learn
what? Here's the
slavery?
thing.
Yes, we should.
I think that's a
Yeah.
great point, and I think that that's always going to be something we're going to have to deal with. Um, there's a lot of so there was a video I watched earlier that made a particular point. Actually, I'll play just this short little piece because it's such a dynamic part when you start talking about reparations.
Why is it important that monetary reparations be made specifically to African Americans as opposed to a broader group, such as Black Americans, which would include Caribbean Americans, possibly African immigrants, or expanded to the broader umbrella of people of color, which includes other racial groups as well?
So we are focusing on the descendants of the individuals who were promised those 40-acre land grants and denied them. These are folks who had the promise of the opportunity to build wealth and, importantly, to pass that wealth on to their children. This is not the case of the more recent immigrants. We know that, for the most part, unless your family was part of the diplomatic corps, Black people from the Caribbean and from the continent were not in the United States in large numbers until the late 60s. They did not experience enslavement in this country. Their ancestors did not experience Jim Crow in this country. They did not experience nearly 100 years of racialized terror against their families in this country. Yes, it is indeed quite likely that many of these individuals have a case that can be made for reparations, but not to the United States government. But individuals who are from Antigua or from Jamaica would take their case for reparations to the UK. Our histories are not the same. There's a huge difference between being forced to come to this country in shackles versus coming voluntarily for the opportunities that you believe are will be available to you. Our research suggests very strongly that the more narrowly, the more specific these claims are, the more likely they are to be supported.
This is so interesting. The reason why I played that is that okay, so for myself, obviously, and my sister, obviously, our parents moved here or came here in the 70s. So we're first generation, right? Although the slaves came, most of them came from the West Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, and so on. We wouldn't be here if our parents hadn't immigrated. And then with Zell, obviously, your parents have a further deep root in the south of the country, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Fonda, as far as your lineage, is it deep rooted in the country or
In the South, yeah.
in the south as well?
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why I wanted to play that is that so I think it's an interesting conversation. Now, me being first generation here, I do think that's important for the reparations conversation. Because when you do start to talk about reparations, you will have every person who's melanated lining up saying, yo, you know what I'm saying? And I'd be the first to say, like, I would never be one of those people lining. Now, my kids are born here, right? But
Right.
and I was born here, right? But I can't I do think there's a specific lineup when it comes to reparations. But the reason why I bring that up is that the experiences of Black people are all different. For reparations, it may be a more sliver, narrow group of people, and I think that part is important for reparations. But the slavery conversation does hit everybody. The transatlantic slave movement or transatlantic slave. I don't call it movement. The transatlantic slave
Trade.
disaster. Hit everybody in the Caribbean, in the Americas, or in America, United States, and obviously in Africa. But I guess my point is, I'm thinking now. I'm like, okay. That being said, we all do come from different places, but we all do have to reckon with the same things moving forward. And I think while, like Zell, you all of us pointed on a lot of truths, things that affected us, how we see the world. And I think that I'm wondering, is there a way we can use it to empower us to, for one, come together a little bit more? And how let me say it like this. I think a lot of our generation, a lot of parts of our generation are angry, resentful, distrustful, and just feel like salty, rightfully so, about the way things are, our place in the world, how things kind of went. And psychologically, there is something as Black people where, as an adult, you do have to come to a point where you're like, you know what? Well, however things are, it's not going to change in my lifetime, but I got to do the best with what I have and be as positive as I can and do what I can do within my journey on this earth. But going forward, how the youth see slavery, I'm always wondering. I wonder what would happen if you taught a young Black child more than slavery, or didn't even touch on slavery deeply. And again, I'm not saying it. I know this is this is controversial, because if you skip over a lot of it, they don't understand, for instance, how the wealth gaps and things like that happen. But my thought is that as you program children, we're all programmed. As children are programmed, as they learn, the question is, do we feel like consistent victims? Is it something that ingrains a certain level of victimness in us, or pride? And is there a way that we can kind of change ourselves from, because like, look, when I saw Roots, you know what I'm saying? When I saw Roots,
Yeah.
Mississippi Burning and all that, I'm like, man, we were getting our asses kicked. And it makes you mad, and it's hard to let go. It's just something that plants deep inside your brain for a long time, and it makes you kind of feel like, yo, I'm the permanent underdog in this thing.
That's
And
if you